Well, we've heard from Eric Corkish on his situation about getting on the Bus Vannin, and quite a lot of mentions were made with Chris Thomas, who's been one of the champions and certainly involved in getting this in Tynwald, wasn't it? I mean, the discussion about it. And before we start, I should always make it quite clear already, Chris Thomas has come out and is standing in the next general election, so make that all clear. What exactly went on in Tynwald, first of all? This has been an ongoing saga.
Yeah, so Tynwald's passed a motion doing two things. Number one, adopting the Confederation of Passenger Transport Code, talk about adopting other codes as well, and that will help disabled people make the use of public transport, firstly, and secondly we've set up a steering group to take this forward. It's not all over by any chance, we've still got lots to do, and I hope that comes up in the interview today.
Well, explain what's going on, because at the end of the day there's reticence, at the least that's word to use, from the DOI on allowing this to proceed, and Bus Vannin in particular don't want Eric's buggy, the Class 2 one, on board their buses at the moment.
The great thing about Eric's campaign was he never made it all about himself. He actually did it on behalf of disabled people, and there's still loads to do in terms of disabled people and various public sector equality duties, as it's called, and various reasonable adjustments that need to be made as public services deliver. We'll come to that in a minute. Yeah. But in terms of Eric's campaign, he can't get on a bus still. That's still wrong. There's still a lot of steps to go through before we get him on a bus to come from Ramsey down to here to do this interview. Yeah. And we're going to need hard work by lots of people, and I'll be involved in that, and I hope other people will still champion the cause.
Not a lot of time left in this Parliament. Do you think they're going to get through?
So we've made changes to the Equality Act, because shockingly, until November 2020, public transport, and Eric's case, wasn't even covered by the Equality Act, and it was shocking to me when Minister Harmer stood up as Minister of Policy and Reform, said that was inadvertent and an omission had been made, because I suspect that might have been slightly less than an accidental omission. So that's one thing that's changed, and that made Eric's case ultimately in the tribunal, I'm sure, easier, because then his situation was covered by the Equality Act.
He's won, we can't talk about it.
And the second point is that we now still need to make regulations under the Road Transport Act 2001 to get things progressed. And all along, if my hypothesis is right, that there's been deliberate delaying tactics, that might be another problem. And as recently as 10th of March 2021, Paul Moulton, and backed up by the Equality Advisor, was making heroic advances to actually get the Road Transport Act 2001 amended, so that regulations can be made to cover reasonable adjustments for mobility and other disabled people.
What do you think about the openness and transparency of this whole thing? It all seems to be shrouded in a lot of things behind. And back to a settlement, a gagging order. It's outrageous, isn't it? Do you think, to have that?
Well, let's spin it around, because I can't talk about it anymore, because I don't know, because Eric won't have told me. But basically, two groups of people have shone out in all of this, or three perhaps even. The first one I wanted to sing the praises of is the Office of Fair Trading, because they have a job to actually sort things out, to conciliate, to work out and try and get a settlement. And I understand from talking to Eric throughout over the last couple of years that they have been very good. They have been doing the best against fierce resistance from the Department of Infrastructure. The second group of people, because I was involved, I actually put myself on the record with the tribunal that I would be a friend to Eric through the process. I wasn't his representative, I wasn't speaking for him, but I was his friend throughout the process. I think the tribunal chair and the tribunal itself and the tribunal staff were very helpful. I put down questions to encourage the thinking about all of this, about conciliation, about how the tribunal would work, but eventually the tribunal knocked heads together and got sense to prevail. And the third thing is, I think pretty much Eric knows this, he won the arguments in the last 18 months quite some time ago, and we've got the issue in all of this is one man or a couple of single men who are resistant to the changes that need to be made, and I think we've got to learn from that. I think basically we need people around the head of Bus Vannin, for instance, to challenge the decisions that are being made. Claire Christian's taken on that challenge as a politician now, and let's hope she's successful, but perhaps I would like to think that we might need a board around Bus Vannin, because it's wrong that one person can actually determine things so fundamentally.
Wow, you said a lot of interesting things there, but will it happen before October, or wait until the new buses come online? What do you think?
Well, I think the steering group now has got to separate the wheat from the chaff. So in terms of the law around access to Bus Vannin, they've got to change policy, they've got to change procedure, and they might even have to change law. Okay, so that's quite a big task. Let's see how quickly they can go. But in terms of, Eric's quite right. You gave me I listened to what he said, and essentially there are lots of myths that have been propagated that I hope the steering group can get rid of. So for instance, there is an issue with curbs. It costs money to deal with curbs, but we want to make sure that the money that's spent on curbs and pavements is being spent in the right way, and it's not being just used just to keep people off buses. There was another myth raised in Tynwald debate by Minister Baker at the beginning of the debate about the fact that the buses couldn't take mobility scooters, and Laurie Hooper demolished that brilliantly by just saying that he'd been in correspondence with bus companies across that were using Isle of Man sold buses, and they hadn't made any adjustments to allow people like Eric with vehicles like Eric's onto the buses after some training and some assessment. And then there's another myth that's beginning to be propagated, which is that buses go too fast between Ramsey and Douglas. But as far as I can tell, we have a 40 mile per hour speed limit for buses. Then in 6 sections of the Isle of Man we have a 50 mile per hour speed limit. Coincidentally, there's one of those sections on all of the major routes in and out of Douglas. But as far as I can see, that same higher speed limit is used across. So I can't see that's an issue. But the steering group now needs to look at these potential issues fairly, reasonably, and then come to conclusions. I use the word gullible in Tynwald, and what I mean is I want my political colleagues who will be invited to serve on that board to make sure that they're not gullible when they hear the evidence from Bus Vannin. We need the truth to come out, and we need actual fair and reasonable assessment and comparison with the cross.
Well, as always, we'd like to hear from DOI, Mr. Baker, or maybe someone from Bus Vannin. And that thing that on the previous interview about where the steps on the road taper, there's a bit of an issue on the promenade, which is of course in the middle being done. Maybe these sort of things can be looked at now rather than later.
And one last thing, I really appreciate your involvement in this issue throughout, Paul. This is it's really important to look at people and see things as well as just hear them and read them. And another important issue that came out of this is you gave a man with a problem a platform to make his case, and there's a saying in the disabled movement, nothing about us without us. Okay, and we're really not going to make progress in tackling all of the issues we have around the Isle of Man. I mean, there's not a cinema you can go into reasonably at the moment. There's lots of issues, as we've discussed on pavements, but in so many other places we're not going to get anywhere with actually getting inside the heads and the lives of disabled people. And I think your championing and others championing of Eric's cause is actually a very valuable learning experience for us. Nothing about us without us. We've got to involve the people who suffer in the working out what the solutions are and what to make their lives easier.
Well, what I just find fascinating is just putting people up for interview to tell their story, and I always think, my goodness, why is that not already known? But by telling other people, that's how hopefully things will change.
So the Equality Act's not there for just a piece of legislation, it's there to enable people, and the best way to enable the people is to get inside their heads, their lives, and to actually learn from them what will make their lives easier, what matters, and what can be done about what matters.